Okay, YouTube, Engineer Boy 100 here. We're going to be doing almost complete rebuild on this 97 or 96 Toyota Corolla. And what I'm going to do first is I'm testing these journals on the crank with what's called the fingernail test to see if there's any scoring or wear. And it's just as smooth as glass. There's absolutely I don't feel anything. So I'm going to put new bearings on these, and I don't think I'll need to worry about polishing them. Once I've tested them all, I take this tape and I put it on backwards with the sticky side out, so I don't get adhesive on the journal. And I just protect this from any unnecessary additional debris before I go up topside and hone the cylinders out, because I'm installing new pistons. So I do this with this tape, protect these journals, then I go up topside and I hone. Okay, we're back up topside now. I've turned the crank so that all the journals are exactly parallel with the cylinders, so that I can go all the way in with my hone. I'm going to use a little WD-40 in those cylinders so my hone stone can work nice and evenly. And I'm going to go up and down really fast so that the speed of my rotation basically matches my velocity going up and down, so I get a 45-degree hatch. So to do that, I have a variable drill, but it also has a high and a low speed. So I put it on low speed so I can just press the trigger all the way down and then go up and down at a fairly rapid pace, and that gets me my 45 degree. So I'll do a couple of those right now. So when you do your hone, you want to make sure you go all the way to the bottom and all the way up above the top, so that you don't create a lip for those rings to catch on and create havoc later. So I won't make you watch all of these, just want to give you the general idea. So I'll do the rest, the last two, off camera. So I finished up the honing. The speed that I did it last time was a little fast, so I'll do the last one again on camera so you can see about the appropriate speed for the drill to get that correct 45-degree hatch angle in the cylinders. I did actually have to use the control, so you want to go really slow, about like that. And then bring it out before you stop rotating. You don't want to stop the rotation while you're still in the cylinder. And that gave me a really nice 45-degree hatch. The next part of this project is getting the new pistons ready for installation. That involves sizing the rings, installing the rings, clocking the rings, and weighing and balancing the pistons. I already weighed the pistons, and I have their weights in grams here. As you can see, number 1 is 305 grams, number 2 is 300 grams, number 3 is 305 grams, and number 4 is 304 grams. So I need to drill out 5 grams out of 1, 5 grams out of 3, and 4 grams out of 4, so that they all match the weight of piston number 2, so that they're balanced. When I weighed them with the pins, and the pins, like if you notice on the spreadsheet, the pins are all 81 grams. They're all the same, so there's no need to take any material off of them. And I weighed the piston and the pin together anyway, so I need to remove the 5 grams off of the 2 and the 4 grams off of the 1. And I'll do that by drilling out a little bit of the material with a drill press, little by little, and then reweighing the piston with the pin until they all weigh 300 grams. That way, the reason for that is the why, and the important reason that you want your pistons to be balanced is that when they're on the crankshaft and they're going up and down really, really fast, if the weights are different, it's gonna wear out your bearings. It's gonna be yanking, you know, at an angle as they go up and down, and it's gonna create, well, eventually it'll create vibration and it'll eventually destroy the bearings. So you want all those pistons to pull evenly up and down as the two, like, but this is a 4-cylinder engine, so 2 center pistons go up and down together, and the 2 outside pistons go up and down together. And as they go up and down, you want the force of them reaching the far end of that rotation to be equal in each direction. So next, I will actually show you how to size the rings, because I've already done 1, 2, and 3. I left the 4th one, as you can see, for this demonstration. And then I will drill material out of the pistons. And I don't think you need to watch that. Just letting you know you need to do that so that they all are balanced. Okay, so now we're back at the cylinder block. We have to size these rings before we install them on the pistons and then install the pistons in the block. So for this vehicle, I'll show you here. Let's see if I can focus this. Okay, so the gap on the rings when they're in the cylinder needs to be, for ring number 1, this is ring number 1, and ring number 2 for the compression rings on top, need to be between 10 thousandths and 18 thousandths. So I'm going to do it at 15 thousandths. And ring number 2 here needs to be between 14 thousandths and 20 thousandths. So I'm sizing it in at 17. So we'll start with number 1. The way you do that is you have to have this gap right here when it goes in the cylinder and closes. That's that dimension that we're talking about. It wants to go only to, in this case, 15 thousandths is what I'm going to gap this one to. So it has to be in the piston, in the cylinder, square, and then you use a feeler gauge and you measure what you have. And then if it's not enough space, you take it out and you file, or if you have a grinder, you grind one side only, not both sides. Leave one side so that you have a square reference, and you only file one side, and then you check it to make sure that they go together nice and square. You only file a little bit at a time, and then you put it in the cylinder and you try it again. So we're going to do that now. Let me get a piston that I've already put together. So this piston already has the rings on it, and I'll use this to push the ring down when I put it in the cylinder to make it square. So let's do that now. Put it in here. And down. And then just push it down with this until it stops. And then that tiny little opening, let me see if I can actually get that to where you can see it. I'm gonna try and I'm gonna measure that opening to see where it is. I'll try 13 thousandths. I don't know. Turn this around. I don't know if you can see this. If you can read this. It's too bright. This is 13 thousandths. So, yeah, that goes in real easy. So I'm going to try 14 thousandths. And it might be good. Let me just try 15 thousandths. No. Okay, so 15 thousandths does not fit, so I do need to grind that a little bit. So I'll show you my grind technique. Another important point about these rings is they have a top and a bottom. So you can't just put them on the piston in any orientation. They are orientation specific. Many of the rings will have either a dot or some kind of a mark indicating which side is the top and which side is the bottom. This particular set actually has the whole word written out right here. I don't know if you can see it, but it's written right here and it says top. The reason for that is these are the compression rings, and the compression rings also scrape the oil down off of the cylinder walls as the piston goes back down after being oiled by the oil coming from the oil pump, and the oil rings at the bottom of the piston rings oils the cylinder to lubricate it. This ring scrapes that oil down to keep oil from actually being excess amount of oil being in the combustion chamber and burning oil. So you do need to make sure the orientation of these rings is correct when you install them. Later I'll show you how to install the rings on the piston, and I will also show you how to clock them, and it's very simple. I've seen a lot of different examples of how it's done on YouTube, and I think I have a simpler, easier to understand way than the 180 degree or 120 degrees and all these degrees. There's a simple way. You just turn your piston over, put an X on it, and line up the 4 different rings with the ends of the X's. But anyway, I'll show you all that after I finish sizing this ring, but I wanted to make sure that I didn't forget to mention that the rings are orientation specific, and there is a top and a bottom to the rings. Okay, so another important point before I file this ring, this is the top where I showed you where it says top before, right here. So I'm going to only file on this side, and I'm going to file from the outside in so that I don't leave a burr on the outside here where this comes in contact with the cylinder wall. So I'm going to go from the outside in. Now you want to really try to keep as flush and as straight as you can. The reason I'm using a hand file instead of a grinder, is I'm just doing this once. So I don't need to spend the money on a grinder, and I'm experienced and I know how to keep this square. If you're not experienced and you don't know how to do it, so you just real light, you don't need to take much off. You just lightly file in one direction, just like that, a couple of times, and then you recheck it. And I'm pretty sure that this little bit that I've taken off will be enough, and we won't need to do any more. I'm trying to get it to be 15 thousandths. So we were already at 13, so I only need to take off like 2 thousandths. That's not much. A piece of paper is about 5 thousandths of an inch thick. So 2 thousandths is like less than half than the thickness of a piece of paper. So let's go back over to the car, recheck this, and see whether I can get my 15 thousandths feeler gauge blade in the opening. Okay, so we're going to install this again, just like so. Just get it below the lip. You want to put it in like that and turn it. Pull this up. So now I've got a trusty little piston here. This one doesn't have any rings on it, but I can feel, look, it's square. Now I'm going to try my 15 thousandths feeler gauge blade here. We have 15 thousandths right here. I don't know if you can see that. Let's see if that goes in. And yeah, that goes in. It's snug, but it's in. I might take a little tiny bit more off. I think it's going to be fine. Goes all the way in, snug but thin. Okay, so that's good. So this ring is sized. And now, once we size all the rings, we can install them, and we'll do that on the bench now. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is actually install these rings. So you want to start with the piston up like this. You want to start at the bottom. This is the oil ring. And that is going to be this little guy right here. This little guy right here. Okay, and when you put it on, you want to make sure that these two ends butt up. And it goes on real easy, so there's no big deal. You just take it, put it on, like so. And it goes on the very bottom. You want to put the rings on in this order too, because you want to work from the bottom up. Because once you put one of the top ones on, it's more difficult, very difficult to get down below to install the others. So you put this oiler spring ring on first, and you make sure that it's butted, just like so, right there. It's butted up, square with itself. Then there are two additional oiler rings that go on either side of this ring. Here, they're very thin in comparison to the two top rings, the actual compression rings. They are very, very thin, and they go on either side of this little spring-looking oiler. So you just put one edge in on the bottom. I'm going to do the bottom first of that, and then you just work your way around, keeping this edge out of the way so it doesn't scratch your piston, and you just slide it in, just like so. And you want to make sure that your oiler stays square, and check all the way around, make sure it's in, and you just kind of work everything until it's flush, just like so. Then you do the other oil ring the same way, but you put it on top of the little oil spring ring, like so. You start it with one edge, and you just work it around, keep that edge away from the piston, and slide it into place. And now your oiler rings are in place. These will, the two little thin rings here will also need to be clocked, just like the compression rings on top. And the way I do it is very simple. You just look at the top. There's a designator that shows you the front of the piston, and the front should be pointing to the front of the engine. That's where all of the drive belts are, is the front. And you install this on the crankshaft. I mean when you install the piston on the rod, this has to be orientated so that the front of the rod points to the front of the engine, and this piston points to the front of the engine. Everything must point to the front of the engine based on this designator, and the designator's on the rods. What I do with this pointing towards the front, between the two sets of detents for the where the valves recesses for the valves, just make an X like this. Just make an X. Okay, and clock your rings at the ends of these X's. The two oiler rings openings, the openings like this here, line up the two oiler rings, one here and one here, and the two compression rings, one here and one here, and that's fine. They're going to move anyway. It doesn't have to be 100%. Some people go 180 and 180, but I just make an X between where the valves go, put them there, and that's going to be fine for installation. Okay, that's all you have to do, and that's what I'll be doing once I get these rings on. So the next one you want to use is your thickest ring, and you want to also double with these two. You really want to make doubly sure you get them on right, or you're going to have problems. So you have to check for that top, And the top should be pointing up toward the top of the engine, towards the top of this piston. That goes on top. And it goes on the same way as the oil ring. It's just a little bit thicker, takes a little bit more effort, and you don't want to scratch that piston. You just put it on, and then there it is. And then once it's on, once they're all on, you can clock them to your X. And that will keep the openings from lining up with each other. So I can get that to go on. There we go. And it keeps these openings here from lining up with each other. So just imagine if you have compression and these are lined up like that, you're going to get blow by. You're going to get oil and compression and everything going right past here. That's why everything needs to be away from, all the openings need to be away from each other. So I'm going to take this last one, check for the top, make sure it says top on it, and looking for the top, there it is. It says top right there. I'm sure you can't see it so small. It's etched onto the ring. And then you just install the ring, just like the rest of them, like so. Once they're on, they're very loosely on, so then I just clock it, just like that. You rotate this one to this X, you rotate this opening towards this X, and then your two bottom ones, rotate them towards the back X. One here, so there's one already there, so just take the other one around to the other piece of X. And now, all my rings are clocked, and this ring is ready to be installed on the rod with the pins. And that's how you install, that's how you size, install, and clock piston rings. Next, I'll be pressing the pins. These are a press fit pins, piston set. Pressing the pins onto the rods, and then installing the rods onto the crank. Okay, the next step for me in this beautiful process is to remove the old rods from the old pistons, because we're going to reuse those rods. So we're going to heat them up and press out those pins, because these are the wrist pins. These are a press fit setup, doesn't have the clips. So let's get started with that right now. There are different techniques I've seen used to remove these wrist pins, but I have a press, so I'm going to just use the press. Heat it up till that small end of the rod expands enough for me to just push that wrist pin on out. I don't want to force it. I need to hold this a little bit more upright so some gas can apply some pressure. And that's one. We'll reheat them up to install them in the new pistons. And the new wrist pins are currently in the freezer shrinking, so that when I go to put this all together, they're as small as possible. And when I heat up this rod to reinstall it, it's as large as possible so that the fit goes in as smoothly and as easily as possible. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and finish up balancing these pistons. I need to take off about 5 grams, well 5 grams off of 2 of them and 4 grams off of 1 of them, so that they all weigh 300 grams each. So I'm just going to show you one example of how I do that. This is one of the 5 gram pistons. So that should weigh probably about 303 grams. It probably took about 2 grams off. Okay, so let's take a look at this just so that we can get a little bit better view of the scale here. Okay, turn that on. And this was 305 grams. So let's see what it is now. So it looks like it's about 304. You see that? So I took off a gram of material. So we have to do it some more. So we're all done balancing the pistons. Give you a quick look what it looks like inside once I'm done drilling to remove the material to reduce the weight. So now these are all right about 300 grams to match the lightest piston. Next we'll heat up that rod, small end, and take the wrist pins out of the freezer and attach the rods to the pistons. Okay, it's time to put the wrist pins in the pistons and connecting rod. As you can see, my wrist pin here is just out of the freezer. It's got frost all over it. So I'm going to heat up this rod, and then I'm going to slide this wrist pin through the piston and through the rod. Now, you should remember the piston's not hot and the wrist pin's not hot, but the rod is. So you can do it with bare hands. I'm going to use a gloved hand for holding this vice grip, and you got to make sure you get these in the right orientation. The piston's front is here, so I'm making doubly sure that that's the front, and the front of this rod is here. You see the other side doesn't have that little bump. It's also on the bottom half. So you want to make sure you get this and that front going the same way, those little divots. So I'm going to heat this up. I don't want my pin to warm up too much. And then when it turns blue, I'm going to put it in here with the vice grip, slide this through and center it with my fingers. So the last one we did, I timed it. It took about 2 minutes. So, and I had about 2 seconds before that thing tightened up too when I pushed that pin through it. But it beats using the press and pulling the press out, and it's not a bad technique at all, I don't think. So I'll heat this one up here for about 2 minutes. I'll just keep an eye on it and watch the color. Make sure I keep the heat moving around so that we have a nice uniform expansion of that opening. And when I see the bluish color of the metal on the shiny part, it starts to turn kind of a bluish color. I'll go ahead and slide that pin in as fast as I can. I just got the second pin out of the freezer. So it's right here, nice and cold, and it's probably going to be a tiny bit smaller than the other one because I didn't caulk a long time before starting. I just went ahead and started. So warming this up nice and hot with some good expansion. And I'll grab the pin and we'll just slide it in. What I could do actually, and what I'm going to do this time to make it even faster, is get that pin started. Keep my heat on here. Get the pin right there at the door. That way it takes even less time to go on through. And it's already aligned, already in the piston there, and I can just shoot it through. So I think it'll save me some time and my technique is improving. This is the first time I've done this. Oh, there we go, we're blue. Alright, so put it in, and it's already lined up, and push. And there we go, it's centered, and it has grabbed. That is how fast it is. Beautiful. So we have successfully done the second rod installation on the piston. And that's hot. Don't forget that that's hot and grab it, because you'll get burned. Okay, I'm going to redo one of these pin insertions. I apologize for the shoulder on the previous one. I went to the junkyard and got another piston and wrist pin so I could actually show you the wrist pin going into the piston. That's how important I thought this was. I really apologize for not paying closer attention and getting in the way. So I'm going to go ahead and heat up this, the small end of this rod again. I'm going to get it nice and blue. And then I'm going to slide this wrist pin through there. And I'm going to get a nice, quick fit without pressing a press fit pin in. I think it's pretty cool. Another thing I noticed as I went along is that it's almost not necessary to put the pin in the freezer. I think there's a negligible amount of shrinkage, and what happens is when the pin is that cold, it makes the end of the rod shrink much faster, and it grabs it much faster than if it was just room temperature. So I'm not going to put this pin in the freezer. I'm just going to use it at room temperature, put a little oil on it, put oil inside of the openings on the piston, and I'm just going to wait until the end of this rod turns blue, put this torch down, and slide the pin in, and it should go in just fine. I'm feeling really bad about getting in the way and not paying attention previous. So I went and got another one, and we're going to do this. I think it's turning blue. You may have noticed, those of you who are very observant and astute may have noticed that this rod is not the same as the others, and this piston is actually used. I cleaned it up a little bit, but it's not one of my new pistons. This is out of the wrecking yard, and it is not new. See, are we turning blue? I think we're turning blue here. I'll make sure, because I don't want to have to do this again. So error on the side of bigger and hotter. Put the torch down gently, and I will slide the pin. The pin should slide right in. So here we go. Don't knock your torch over and start a fire if you're going to leave it lit. Word of caution, I have a fire extinguisher and some water back there, so I'm going to try and be careful because I'm going to leave this torch lit because I want to take the time to turn it off. So here we go. There we go, room temperature, and slides right in. As soon as you look at that, I still have time. It's moving, and then it grabs. So you do have a little bit more time by doing it room temperature. Okay, and there you have it. Thanks for watching. Okay, so we just finished greasing up and assembly lubing all of the journals on the crankshaft. You can see that blue stuff. I don't know if you can see it on the crank. Yeah, that is the grease for assembly because we're getting ready to install the pistons. In addition, I've already pre-installed all of the bearings on the rods and greased those, so I'll show you those real quick. We have all the end caps here, greased up and ready to go, and of course the rods and pistons that we just installed, all pre-lubed and ready for installation. So next, we'll install the pistons and torque the rods to spec. For the installation of the pistons, you need to use a special spring ring compression tool, and the way it works, you tighten it up on the outside of the piston. This here, you put it on, you tighten it up, but you need to oil all the inside surfaces here because there's a lot of friction. As you tighten it, if it's not oiled, it gets really weird and hard to compress the springs correctly. So that's a useful tip. Make sure your tool is oiled on all of the surfaces that slide up against each other, because it kind of starts acting like a clutch. So next, I'm going to put the tool on the piston. Then I'll use the wooden handle of a hammer to tap it down into the cylinder. And you want to really double check and make sure that the front mark of your piston and the front mark on your rod are facing towards the front of the engine, where all of the serpentine belts are that turn your alternator and your alternator and your air conditioner and all of those different pieces. So now we'll compress the rings. Open this up a little bit, and we'll go and install this piston, number 1. See how easy that turns really nice and easy when it's oiled well. You oil it really well like that, and it just really turns easily. What you want to do is have these little tabs on the bottom sticking out just a tiny bit so that you can get it started easily. I just have like half of the tab sticking out like that. Then you tighten it down really good, because you want to have those rings flush with the piston. So now we're going to go over to the car and tap this piston into its cylinder, making sure that it's facing towards the front of the engine. Okay, so here we go. Here's the front. The engine in front of the engine is that way. We've oiled up the cylinder, and now we're going to install this. And there it goes. It starts very nicely. Then I have my hammer here. You don't use the hammer part. You use the handle so you don't damage your piston. And you don't hit it hard. You tap gently, because it should go in very easily. If everything is lined up correctly and the springs are depressed enough, it should just go in just a little tap. It should take almost nothing. And then you've installed your piston. And then you do the other 3. And I make sure that the crank for this particular one is turned with the journal all the way down, so that it's easy for me to put the cap on and I don't accidentally hit my journal with those screws. Next, I'll go underneath and button it up. Alright, so we got the bottom half, actually this is the upper, the upper half of the oil pan. And I'm just going to decrease this the surface here. Now I don't want to downplay how much effort it takes to clean this properly. To get the old sealer off, gasket sealer off, I used a spatula first, cleaned it up as best I could, first round. Then I went over with a razor blade to get it all the way down to these little grooves here, these recesses. Then I went through with my little set of picks and I cleaned out all of the extra adhesive, old adhesive that was in these grooves here. And finally, before I do the degreaser, and any little residue that was left, I scraped and roughed up the surface a little bit for a better adhesion of the new sealer. I roughed this up with the wire brush here. So this degreasing portion that you're seeing now is not all that goes into cleaning the surfaces of this upper half of the oil pan. And when I say surfaces, I mean that because there's one on this side and there's one on this side. And this portion here faces down, and it accepts the second half of the oil pan, which is this, that you have to put on separately after. You can't install it while it's off because there are bolts inside. I'll show you here. You'll see it. There are bolts that bolt to the engine block that are inside this area. 1, 2, 3, 4. That you have to put those in first before you install the bottom half of that oil pan. So you can't install the oil pan on the bench. the bottom half of the oil pan on the bench, or any part of it on the bench. So anyway, we're cleaning it up, and now it's ready to put the top half of the gray, ultra gray gasket sealer. This is what I use on a lot of things, threads, and it just works good. So I put a good thick 1/4 inch bead of this all the way around, install it, tighten it up just a little bit, let it dry a bit, and then I tighten it a little bit more, and that really creates a good seal, and I never get any leaks when I use that technique. So we'll do that. I'm gonna go up underneath, install this, then I'll install the oil screen on the oil pump, and then I'll install the bottom half of the oil pan. So I guess I'll just let you watch me do the gasket sealer here, so you can get an idea how I do it. You just want to get a nice continuous bead that goes right over that little indent, and you go all the way around continuously without breaking. And generally I don't even touch it afterwards. I let it self-level. Once I put it in the car, I just let it mash itself down. I don't smooth it on with my finger. I don't touch it. I just let it do its thing, and it works excellent. Once you have proper surface prep, you don't have to worry about much else. Just put enough of it on there, and I put a lot. So if you ever go behind me and take one of these off, it's going to be a bugger. It's going to be tough, and that means I did a good job. And that's it. And I'll put this upper portion on, I'll put the oil screen on, the oil pump, and then we can put that bottom half on. Okay, I'm gonna let you watch me put this bottom half, I keep saying bottom, the upper half of the oil pan on. Hopefully I can get it on without too much hassle, and secure it with a few bolts. I'm gonna kind of go up over this height, over the frame, and hopefully you don't touch the bottom part here. I think I'm gonna make it. Looks good. Don't touch anything yet. And then you want to line it up. Just made it through here. You want to line it up and get some. Yeah, perfect. You want to get some of these screws to hold it in place. Oh yeah. See if I can get that. It's okay if it moves around a little bit. It's just gonna smear the sealer a bit for you and help you to achieve a more complete seal. Let's see if I can. Oh yeah. There we go. There's some here. Get a couple of these holding, and I can take my time and slowly tighten them up. And I'm not going to tighten them up real tight because I don't want to squeeze out all of my my gasket sealer. I don't want it to be too thin, so I let it cure a little bit first, and then I tighten it up a little bit more later. So this is my own personal little technique that I've learned over the years about squeeze out and sealers and adhesives and leaks. I don't want any leaks, so I'm not going to tighten this upper oil pan down really tight initially, because I don't want any leaks later. So you tighten it up loosely first, and then you just snug it on the second round. You still don't tighten it up like it's a cylinder head or a bolt on a crank main bearing. You want to tighten it up just snug so that it's holding a nice tight seal of this gasket sealer that you put in there. And it works out great. So I'm not going to make you watch this whole process. That's basically it. I got it lined up. I got a few bolts in. It's holding nicely. I can see some squeeze out on the outside, inside of my bolt holes here. I get them all in there before it starts to dry. It dries pretty slow, so there's not much to worry about. It takes about, I don't know, 30 minutes to an hour. So there's no rush. And that's how you put the lower portion on. I'm going to turn off the camera, finish this up, and I'll turn it back on when I install the oil screen here and when I install the lower portion of the oil pan. And that'll be the last of the bottom end work. And after that, we'll go to the top end and install the cylinder head, which when I take the cylinder heads off on jobs where I'm not doing really anything to the cylinder head, which I already did the cylinder head work, I take the cylinder head and the intake manifold off together. It saves you a lot of work. I do not try and fight that intake manifold and take it off on a car. I just leave it on, do what I have to do, and then put them both on together, and I'll show you that too when we return. One other piece of advice: when putting this upper half on, there are 3 bolts here that go in the back here, and you can't see it really because I guess you could. It's hard to see, but my point in mentioning this is you really, this is another reason why you really do not want to put a gasket on this. It's not made for a gasket. This half is made to use gasket sealer, not a gasket. If you put a gasket on here, it's going to be too thick. And then these threads that go in laterally, these bolts that go in laterally, their threads will not line up with the threaded hole on the engine block. This portion will be down too far. So don't get cute and clever and, oh, I'm going to make it seal even better and put a gasket in there and then put gasket sealer in there. Yeah, it'll seal really, really good, but you won't be able to put the rest of your bolts in. And then that's not going to be a good thing. So do it correctly. Only use sealer. Don't try to put a gasket in there, a paper gasket in there. I don't even think they make them. You can get the gasket paper and make your own, but don't. It would be a mistake. You will regret it. Alright. So, just thought of that when I was getting ready to put these in. I said, oh, you know what? I better warn anyone who's going to work on this same car, a 96 Toyota Corolla, not to try to get cute and come up with your own gasket for this lower, the upper oil pan, because your holes won't line up correctly for these lateral bolts. Okay, so I'm gone for real this time on this upper oil pan. Okay, so the bottom half is all buttoned up and on nice and tight. Now we are going to install the oil pump screening. When you do that, you want to make sure you don't forget this little gasket here that seals the screen onto the bottom of the oil pump. And we get that in there so you don't have any internal oil hemorrhaging. So put that on and get some nuts on there to hold that in place. Takes 2 little, actually takes 3. 3 little nuts. One here, and one here. And I think, yeah, that goes like that. And let's see what else we have here. One more nut. And that'll hold it very nicely. You double check. See if there's an undercover that catches metal and protects it. See if this goes. How does this go? I think. Yeah. Did I mess up here? I think I messed up. think. Let's see. 1, 2. No, that's right. So yeah, they both on here like this. Check and see if I messed up. And I'm supposed to hold this on with one of the bolts that holds the screen on, but I had it right. So there's the undercover, and then you just want to tighten these all up. You can torque them if you want. It's probably about 15. You see, no, it's probably less than that. I'm not gonna say anything. I don't know. All I know is I know what it's supposed to feel like. So you can look up torque if you're inexperienced. If you're experienced, you know what these threads feel like just before yield and how tight to tighten them. And that's what I'm going to go by. 35 years of experience doing this without a failure. And I'm going to do it by feel, which is what those torque specs are based on. Somebody with experience tightening these things up and then measuring what they establish is the best tightness, and other lab tests, testing things to failure and tensile strength and all kinds of good stuff. But this is not like doing a head bolt. It's not critical. You just don't want it coming loose. So I tighten it up nice and snug with a bug in a rug, and that is good enough. Very, very nice. Snug. Snug in a rug. And you know what? I didn't tighten up the ones on the screen. Ha! I went to try to tighten them and they were covered. Oh man. I wonder if I should include this in the video. Should I cut it? Should I edit this out, or should I show my little mistake here? Because that's not good. That's not good. That's not good. That's not good. I got ahead of myself. So I was so excited that I figured out which way this bottom plate goes. I went ahead and put it on before I finished tightening up the oil screen. Luckily, I continuously go over what I'm doing in my head, and I caught my mistake even after it was covered up. And yes, I do make mistakes. I don't know if I should be admitting that, but I admit it. I do admit it. So yeah, see, these are not tight. Tighten these up. And I probably should get a socket for that. I'm gonna have to get a 10mm socket extension for that. Okay, let's do this right. So yeah, snug that. Does not have to be crazy tight. But you do want to snug it and then give it like another quarter turn. Snug up, that one's tight. Now, I can feel confident knowing that I know how to put the bottom plate on correctly. Ta-da! And there we go. So once I get this on, I'm going to wipe this surface down again because I've been touching and getting oil all over it. I'll wipe that down again with a little bit of degreaser. And then I will put some gasket sealer on the bottom half of the oil pan, and then I'll bolt it up as well and snug it up the same way I'm doing this one and these bottom plates and screens. And then I'll snug it up a little bit more later once the gasket sealer cures a little bit. Once it cures a little bit, it's firm, I'll go ahead and give it another little squeeze so I have some built-in spring in my adhesive and in my sealer, so that it helps to seal better. And I don't have any leaks. I don't have to do this again for many years or ever. All right, so there we go. Okay, I'm back, and I'm going to install the bottom half of the oil pan. Let me see if you can see that. This little guy here. See, the gasket sealer on here. And I'm just going to put it on just like this, nice and easy. Plenty of gasket sealer on it. Slide it up and slide it into place. Just like that. There we go. We have a couple of nuts and bolts here. Get it started. Hold it up with these nuts, and then we'll go around and just start snugging away. Let's see what we have on the side here. Put a bolt over here so that we can have it held up on both sides. And that's it. That's the bottom half of the oil pan. It's fun under here. See you later. We'll be up topside next, doing the installation of the cylinder head. Thanks for watching. Okay, we're done with all of the bottom end work. The oil pan top and bottom halves are installed and tightened up correctly. So now we're going to put the head on, but I'm going to try and show people how the head comes off, because it's easier to show you how it comes off with it already off than it is to show you by taking it off, how easy it is to reinstall. Now this looks like a jumbled mess, but really it's quite simple. And I'll go from right to left, and show you exactly what has to come loose to take the head off, and it's not really all that complicated when you go step by step. So first off, you just have these two little heater hoses. Okay, they take coolant, and this is a fuel hose here, and you have a fuel line here, and that's about all the hoses that need to come off. There are a couple of other small hoses that are on the intake manifold, but they don't need to come loose because they go from the intake manifold directly over to the head. So you have these four hoses: your fuel supply and return, and your heater supply and return. Then as you go to your wiring harness, there's only a few connections, and I would just tape these up as you go so you can see what goes where. It's only a few. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4. Then as you go across, all these is for the fuel injectors. So there's 4 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4. And this fuel injector harness mounts to the back of the intake manifold, and there's only 3 bolts. 1. So yeah, this connector on the bottom here goes on the back of this pipe that connects to the back of the water pump. Then if you continue on up your wiring harness, there's just a couple more connections, and they're all the way on the end here. This goes to your oil pressure sensor here. This goes to your air conditioning compressor switch, and both of these two go to the alternator, and that's it. That's it. This wraps around, goes to the alternator. You go down here, you have your fuel injectors. Come over here, you have your fuel supply and return hoses, and a couple of electrical connectors. And that's it. You take that stuff loose, and you can pull the head off with the intake manifold. So that's what we're going to see next. Installation of the head and intake manifold. Now this little setup here is kind of interesting. What I do is I go top dead center which it isn't right now because we installed the pistons, but I go top dead center. Then I mark the belt and the timing sprocket. Okay. I also loosen the tensioner up, the timing belt tensioner. I loosen it up, pry it back with a bar, and then tighten it in the loosened position so I have slack in this timing belt. Then I put like a bungee cord on it to hold it onto the crank sprocket. Then when I go to put everything back together, I go back to top dead center. I have my little mark, which is all the way down here. I'll turn that up. I have a little mark on this. I put that back on my timing sprocket, and everything's timed. You have to do your cams, and I'll show you how to do that. There's some alignment marks on the cams, so I line those. When those are lined up, top dead center is lined up, and the timing marks down here are lined up on 0. Everything, and it works every time perfectly. Simple. You don't have to go through any headaches trying to get the timing back on. I get in the car, turn the key, and it fires. So, without further ado, I will go and get the head and the intake manifold and install them. Alright, one more tip that'll save you a lot of headaches. This is a bolt. Okay, the intake brace. It's right back here, okay? This right here. This bolts onto the bottom of the engine block and up on the intake manifold. There's one bolt that holds it, and I have here in this bag. You want to put your head and intake manifold on and then bolt this on first. Or if you forget or you just don't want to do it that way, there's another bolt at the bottom, the one down on the block. Loosen that up and it won't give you such a headache getting that aligned with the threads in the intake manifold. Otherwise, it's going to be really, really tough to get it to line up. And that's a really good tip for avoiding massive headaches. Alright, so now we go and we'll get the head. Okay, gotta get the head. Push those wires out of the way for now. And don't want to break any of them. So I kind of just snake them up. Don't want to damage the head gasket either. So you kind of play a balancing game here. Pull this up a little bit. And once I get this wiring harness down underneath here, I want to put that bolt on next. So just nice and easy. You don't have to panic or rush or anything like that. It's nice if you have a helper, but I don't have a helper, so I don't feel like taking my engine hoist out. And this is a tiny little engine, so it's not too bad. So actually, you can I can snake these on up. Now. Why wait? Just snake these on up because they have to come up through here anyway. Do it now. And then start aligning my pins with my head here. So, where is it? Gliding on the pins. See the rest of those. My other wires are out, the connectors for my fuel injectors down here. I don't want to smash them, so I'll just pull them up now and be done with it. Okay? Those are the ones we showed earlier. So now all we have to do, align this, and once I align it, then I'll tilt it and I'll connect that bolt up to the brace and the intake manifold. Yeah. so that's lined up and it plunked in. And before I tighten anything up, we're going to get this little bolt back here and attach it, the brace, to the intake manifold. While we can move it around a little bit, which I might not have to move it around. So you can move it a little bit like that and get it to line up with those threads and make your life a lot easier. See, I got it in already. It's a little 12mm bolt. Now that's in. I'll tighten it up later. I won't forget. And now I can just put my check for thrust washers. All good. And I can put my head bolts on and torque down my head. Next thing after that will be the camshafts. I'll show you how to line those up. Another thing too that's important to note, the intake bolts and the exhaust bolts are not the same length. Okay? See this? These are the intakes, these are the exhausts. The exhausts are longer. So you don't want to get them mixed up. Which ones go where? You want to get them in the right location. Just go in, plop. Just put them in like so. Yeah. They should all be about the same height, even though they're different lengths, because the exhaust bolts have to go down farther to reach the threads. The female thread down there. They should all sit about the same height. Make sure you have thrust washers in there. And now you can start these all by hand and then go through and do your torque sequence. Okay? And that's that. Hi YouTube. Welcome to another session in the garage. Today we're going to learn how to set the timing on a 7A FE engine on a Toyota Corolla. We're going to set the installation marks on the camshafts, and then we'll go over to the vehicle and look at the timing marks on the sprocket, the upper sprocket for the camshaft, and the lower sprocket for the crankshaft. Okay, so now we're zoomed in. Here are the camshafts. Before you install the camshafts, you'll notice this particular cam gear has a set screw. This screw holds a sprung gear here that keeps your gears from rattling from lash. If you don't have the screw in place beforehand, not to worry. All you need to do is get this little tool here. Okay, you install it into these little holes in the back. So there's two little holes. You put the tool in the holes, and you can use this to turn the gear. Now to stabilize it, there is a nut built into the camshaft that you can put a wrench on or put in a vise to hold it, so that you can turn the sprung gear until the hole lines up with this little 10mm bolt. And you just screw your bolt in to hold your sprung gear in place. Now, when you're going to set your installation marks on the camshafts, a rule of thumb to make sure you have it, you're using the correct marks, is the cam lobes should both be pointing towards the front of the vehicle on both camshafts on the first two lobes. When these two lobes are pointing towards the front of the vehicle, like so, pointing towards the front of the vehicle when installed, that means you have these installation marks here that I've marked in white so that you can see correctly. So now we'll go over to the car and we'll take a closer look at the timing marks on the cam timing sprocket. Okay, so now we've installed the camshafts in the vehicle, and note the installation marks here on the camshafts are lined up with each other. And to check that, to make sure we use the correct marks, the cam lobes, as you'll notice, are pointing towards the front of the vehicle on both camshafts. Here on the exhaust camshaft and also here on the intake camshaft. That lets us know that the cams are installed correctly. Next, we want to come around here and look at the timing mark. This timing mark is how you align the top timing sprocket on the exhaust. The timing sprocket has a hole in it right here. This hole needs to align with that top timing mark. You need to be able to look through that hole and see that timing mark to make sure that the top portion of the engine is properly timed. Once that's done, we can go to the bottom and time the crankshaft. Okay, so we're on the top side of the engine now. We're looking down at the crankshaft pulley. We're going to turn the pulley so that the timing mark on the pulley lines up with the 0 on the front engine cover. So we'll do that now. So now the top of the engine is lined up, the bottom of the engine is lined up. Now you can take the crankshaft pulley off, the front engine cover off again, and install the timing belt. Now we're on the bottom side and we're looking at the tensioner. A little tip: when you're going to put the timing belt on, loosen up this tensioner bolt right here, and push the tensioner all the way as far as you can to the left, this way, so that you have an opening here. So you see a big opening. That will leave slack so that you can put the timing belt on. When you do that, leave the spring attached and retighten the tensioner in the leftmost position. That will enable you to put the timing belt on, then release the bolt once it's in place, and you don't have to try to attach the spring once the pulley is tensioned down on the belt. Okay, we're all done. Got her running, and she is running smooth. New pistons, just about new everything. Let's go over here and look on the right hand side, and you can see down in there, if you know what you're looking for, there's a brand new water pump. See the belt turning it? New water pump, new pistons, new rod bearings inside, of course new oil and transmission fluid. There's the new oil filter down off in there, little tint of blue. We have a brand new tune-up, fresh tune-up, new air filter, and if you can look down in there at the angle, you can actually see a hint of the brand new starter, so that we don't have any starting issues down underneath. Tacked onto the back of the transmission down there. So cleaned out the EGR valve, and of course we have the new radiator to keep it nice and cool. And I want to hear this little guy. We're breaking it into, so revving it is actually really, really good for it. Take a listen to this. That's the sound of another 300,000 miles. So there you have it. 7 ASE engine rebuild. We've replaced the pistons, rebuilt the top end, rebuilt the bottom end with the rod bearings, starter, water pump, new radiator. Everything works great. Awesome. A successful completion of a great project once again. Thanks for watching. Engineer Boy 100 and your car care companion signing off. Please subscribe and like and share.